One of my favorite things lately has been interacting with all of the other like-minded small business owners inside of my free online community. If you want access to free resources, tools, trainings, tons of great sales advice, and just general encouragement for your business journey, then click the link in the show notes and join myself and other small business owners inside the She Sells Differently Facebook group today. I'm taking a little bit of a podcast break during the holiday season, but that doesn't mean that you have to take a break from She Sells Differently. And I am bringing you a couple of replays of my best podcast episodes from 2024. Over the holiday season, I want you to dive into these episodes and really get excited about the upcoming new year. So I hope that you enjoy these best performing episodes from this year and get excited about what's to come in 2025. Are there specific products that you feel do better on Etsy than others?
So Etsy, the way they're positioning themselves more and more and more is really as the center for gifting. And we want to keep in mind that the types of items that are most giftable typically are non-sized items and personalized items. So if you're thinking, I'm going to create a print-on-demand shop, I'm going to do like all these t-shirts and sweatshirts. Well, how many people in your life would you comfortably buy apparel for? You know, who would you guess a size for and be comfortable with that, you know, as a Christmas present, that type of thing. So non-sized giftable items, really, really great, as well as personalization. That's a way to just immediately, instantly increase the value proposition.
Hi, friends. Welcome to She Sells Differently, the show for aspiring women entrepreneurs looking to overcome the fear of selling and grow thriving businesses from a place of authenticity and confidence. I'm Andy Hart, and it wasn't all that long ago that I was a sales executive for a Fortune 500 company. But I knew in my heart that I was called to use my gifts for something more, something different. That's exactly why I created the She Sells Differently podcast. Each episode is going to deliver you business strategies, tools, and mindset shifts to help set you and your brand apart from our culture's expectations. It's time to elevate your sales and build a profitable, sustainable business you're proud of. One built on integrity, grace, and humility. It's time to learn how to sell differently. Welcome to the She Sells Differently podcast. I am really excited to have Dylan Jahraus with us today. I had the pleasure of being on her podcast a little while ago, and she is going to bring a wealth of wisdom to all of you guys today because she specializes in selling on Etsy. And I know so many of my listeners love selling on Etsy and have a lot of questions and have so much to learn about that. So welcome, Dylan, to the She Sells Differently podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I think there's a lot of overlap in our audiences and just a lot to talk about today.
Yes, for sure. And I'm excited to learn from you too. We were talking before we started recording about it's been so long since I sold on Etsy, but I feel like things have changed and I'm just excited to learn from you and your success in selling on Etsy.
Yes. Yeah. Things have changed quite a bit over the last, especially 5 years.
Yeah. What are some of those things that have changed in your opinion? Like what are some of the big changes that Etsy has rolled out?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I would almost say the changes are more with the competitive landscape than Etsy itself. Etsy actually doesn't roll out very dramatic changes. They have, especially in the last year, made a few changes, but really the biggest thing that I've seen change is the competition. And really what happened was 2020. Everyone was home and a lot of people were starting side hustles. And Etsy, probably the lowest barrier to entry, right? Probably before Shopify dropshipping. So people would start on Etsy, open up these shops, throw some things up there, leave them. So it kind of created a lot of noise, and it seemed saturated, but it was saturated with bad listings, really.
Mm.
So that's really the biggest change that I've seen. And a lot of those shops, they're still around and they're kind of dormant.
That's interesting. And I should have started out asking you, I kind of jumped into that question, but I should have started out asking how you got into really the niche of teaching people how to sell on Etsy. And so tell us a little bit about your background.
Yes, yeah. So my background, it's all corporate e-commerce. So worked for some big companies, Zappos in Las Vegas, moved up to Seattle, worked for Zulily, and that's my whole background. On the buying side, product development, planning, forecasting, pricing strategy. And then I met someone in the military, and we got married, moved to San Diego, and I didn't realize how often we'd be moving. I don't know why I didn't really think about that. When you're in love, love is blind.
Right.
So yeah, so we move a lot, and it's hard to continue to climb the corporate ladder. Back then, everyone wasn't remote, like a lot of people are now. So you had to be going into offices, and I just was having a really hard time finding a corporate e-commerce or just even retail job. And so I started doing side hustles, dog walking, house sitting, all this stuff. And then Etsy was one of those. Threw something up on Etsy. It was from our wedding. It was like one picture, one sentence. 2 months later, it sold. I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And then after that, just 2 months later, we were over 10,000 a month consistently, did over 100,000 our first year, and never really looked back. So that was 8 years ago. Fast forward to today, I've been coaching and consulting on Etsy for over 2 years. We have a team of about 31, 13 on the coaching team, and we are not just helping people scale their Etsy businesses, but also we're coming out with software for Etsy as well.
That's amazing. Wow. So what do you attribute that early success in selling those products on Etsy? What do you attribute that to?
Yeah. So that first listing that sold, that was total luck, right? Because I've treated it like Craigslist. I put up one picture, one sentence. It was I can't believe someone ordered it in hindsight. There's just so little information. But then I thought, why am I not putting everything I know from corporate e-commerce into Etsy? It's the same principles.
Right.
So it's really applying that to the platform, and that changed everything.
That's so interesting. And I think what's interesting to me about my entrepreneurial journey is how much of what I learned in corporate I have applied and taken into teaching now and selling skills. So I love hearing that from you as well. I love that. What do you think are some of the key elements of a successful Etsy shop?
I think now, it's a little more competitive. So you have to be very intentional about really reverse engineering your goal here. So we always start with our customer. So who do you want to sell to? Whose income do you want to rely on for your income to pay you? And we don't want to choose the most price sensitive people who, they're choosing between your blanket and cereal.
Right.
Yeah. So, customer first, product second. We always want to start with that. And then building our product mix around them. So not just picking one product or having a shop filled with t-shirts or one type of product, but looking at how can we really maximize the lifetime value of this customer and serve them for at least 4 to 7 years in as many areas of their life as possible. Instead of just chasing new transactions, new customers, we want to build on the ones we're acquiring.
Yeah. And that's interesting because I don't know what the latest statistics are, but I have heard them that it is so much easier to keep a current customer than to acquire a new one. And so really maximizing the lifetime value of a customer is really so much more profitable from a business standpoint than trying to acquire a new customer.
Exactly. And profitable customers, people with higher discretionary income, they will pay for good service and a good customer experience. So that is a huge part. And I really took that from Zappos, which is, all about creating that wow customer experience. And we're applying that to our Etsy shop experiences for our customers. So why would we put in all this effort into just one transaction when, you have an opportunity to have that customer for life if you can serve them in more ways.
Yes. And I feel that in today's marketplace, and this is something I really stress to my clients as well, that customer experience is such a lost art.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can create that just invaluable customer experience where people want to do business with you because you make it easy on them, that is part of your product, right? That's part of the overall experience. And so I can think of several brands, Zappos being one. I also think of like a Nordstrom, like just doing business with Nordstrom is just so easy, their return policy and their customer experience.
Yeah. And that's the thing about Etsy, unlike selling on Amazon, with Etsy, you own your shop policies and you own customer experience. You're the one communicating with the customer throughout their journey, and you're really orchestrating that customer journey with them. Whereas Amazon or, Walmart, some other platforms, you just have less control as the seller over that customer experience. So with Etsy, it's about setting expectations and exceeding them. So say it's going to ship in 5 days, knowing it's going to ship in 24 to 48 hours. It's all about just setting expectations, exceeding them, and communication, right? So the messaging platform, not just the volume of communication, not sending one, super long message, but frequency, touch points. Thank you for your order. Okay, it's in production. Okay, it just shipped. Okay, it's arriving tomorrow. That frequency is really helpful for that premium customer.
Yes. That's what I always like to call delighting your customer, not just with the product, because that's what they expect. They expect a great product, but delighting your customer in everything outside of the product.
Yes, exactly. Like yesterday, I went to Dairy Queen with the kids. Sorry, this is off topic, but we ordered like kitty cones, and then because I didn't want a big one, and then the guy working there, I think he must have seen like, oh, she's gonna have one of these, and he gave me like this huge one. But it was like we ordered the kitty cone size, but then they just went above and beyond. Little things like that.
Yes, surprising and delighting. I love it. Are there specific products that you feel do better on Etsy than others?
So Etsy, the way they're positioning themselves more and more and more is really as the center for gifting. And we want to keep in mind that the types of items that are most giftable typically are non-sized items and personalized items. So if you're thinking, I'm going to create a print-on-demand shop, I'm going to do like all these t-shirts and sweatshirts. Well, how many people in your life would you comfortably buy apparel for? Who would you guess a size for and be comfortable with that, as a Christmas present, that type of thing. So non-sized giftable items, really, really great, as well as personalization. That's a way to just immediately, instantly increase the value proposition. So if you can do those, that's a really good starting point.
So I want to dig into that a little bit more because a lot of my clients, a lot of my listeners are candle makers because I started out my business and I own a candle company, and a lot of them are interested in wholesaling. So I want to kind of break this down a couple of different ways. One, from a candle perspective or from like a home fragrance perspective, that's obviously a very giftable item. How do candles do on Etsy from that perspective?
Yes. Okay. I love this because it is going to be different than going the wholesale route where you might be like in a bunch of boutiques or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the customer, they're smelling it. It's the senses, right? Selling online, especially with candles, if you are not an established brand, right? Like, what is it? What's that volcano candle from Anthropologie? What is the brand? Is it Volcano? It's not Volcano.
Volcano is the scent, but it is, now it's going to drive me nuts.
Yeah. I have these all over.
Capri Blue. Capri Blue.
Capri Blue. Yes. So if you're not an established brand and you don't have that previous like customer trust where they're buying it because of the scent, then your first transactions, it's not going to be because of the scent. It's most likely going to be because how you're packaging it. So whether it's in a gift box, it's the purpose, utility of it being a gift, or the label, right? Maybe there's something like a saying, or it's a beautiful label, or the vessel that it's in. Maybe it's a more unique vessel and they're thinking this will look great but it's really more, it has to have visual appeal if you have no really brand equity built up. So that's, you can definitely have the scent and the appeal of that come later as you build your brand, but that's not enough to convert a customer visually on Etsy. You have to focus on the visual presentation.
Which is so funny that you mentioned that, because I literally just released an episode 132, on how product packaging will help you sell your products. So we'll link that in the show notes, but that is so spot on with what you're talking about, that, I always tell my clients, like, your customers, whether they're retail or direct to consumer, they cannot smell your product through the screen. So you have to sell with your product packaging and your product images. How do you, on Etsy, and this is a common question that a lot of my listeners have, I wish I had $1 every time someone said, oh, the candle industry is so saturated, or home fragrance industry. How do you give advice on how to stand out among the competition, especially when there's kind of that quote unquote saturated market?
So I always recommend, you want to be innovative with a product that is so classic and traditional, like a candle. You have got to be innovative. And there's a brand I love. It's a local boutique in San Diego called Pigment. So it's called, if you just Google shop Pigment and then type in candle, you will see so many examples of the innovation with candles specifically. And you can't just stick with what worked 5 years ago. Like, you have to keep coming out with either new vessels, and have trends come through in the shape, the texture. Anthropologie does this pretty well as well with their candle assortment, but new. It's got to be new, and colors that photograph well, textures that show dimension. So some candles that do really well on Etsy they look like food, or they look like they have like a bunch of crystals in them, like in the wax. I'm not a candle maker, so forgive me. You know what I mean? Or they'll have like dried flowers kind of melted in just to add color and depth and something unique. Or they'll have like a really funny saying, or they'll turn it into, the purpose of a realtor gift because it's personalized with a portrait of the house on it.
Yeah.
So it's got to be more than a scent. And yeah, I can't stress that enough.
Yeah. Creating something unique and iterating on what you have already done. And I always I love to bring in a guest to my paid community, my paid membership, that does a trend and marketing report for twice a year for the seasons. And he always talks about this exact, what you just hit on. I love that you really emphasize that, because he talks about iterating on your best sellers and how you create something new and innovative.
Yeah.
And really build upon that. And I love talking to all my clients, and I tell them all the time, like, there is room for you in this market, because I talk to hundreds of you guys every month, and you all have new and creative ideas. But in your mind, you often just think, oh, it's just a saturated market, but you have beautiful creative ideas. So take that and run with it,
Absolutely. And even like in the candle market, I just did a big trend kind of overhaul for the back half of this year for our students. And like, I have a student who sells candles, and I say this incorrectly all the time, but it's toile, Toile. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like the French inspired print.
Oh, yes. Yes. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'd happily spell it, but but that, it's like a light pink, very like French inspired pattern that's on her candles, and they're doing well because of the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we're noticing rounded edges or rounded corners be a huge trend. We're seeing this at Anthropologie, especially. So if you think about, instead of like, let's say a square candle vessel, like something that's an oval or like oblong, we're seeing that. We're seeing this trend with waviness, kind of like squigglies and waviness. That is coming up everywhere. Now, the trends are not coming to Etsy first. They're coming to Etsy, I would say 6 to 8 months later. So if you can keep an eye on trends outside of Etsy, you're much better off, just because then you can be established as a market leader by bringing it to the Etsy platform.
That's interesting. That's interesting. How do you feel with so many of my listeners that are interested in pursuing wholesale? How do you recommend them balancing their wholesale clients with direct to consumer on Etsy?
Yes. So, couple ways you can do this. You could have number one, you always want to focus on where the gross margin dollars are coming from. What is most profitable for you? Sure, maybe you are selling $20,000 a month wholesale and you make $2,000 in profit on that. Whereas maybe you sell $5,000 a month on Etsy and you're making $3,500 in profit on that. So always just pay attention to where the constraints of the business is. Like if you are constrained on time or bandwidth, look at where the most profitable area is. I think having a balance of B2C and B2B is so important. So, direct to consumer and doing wholesale, especially if you want to be an established brand that is building up brand equity to maybe have an exit at some point. Both are really important for that. I also think that with Etsy, consider having limited edition things on Etsy or testing the market on Etsy. So then you can go to your wholesale clients and say, hey, this is doing really, really well. I could do a special makeup for you, maybe changing the color out. And if they're really, specific about pricing and your pricing and they don't like to see you have things on sale, differentiating the product a little bit, whether it be the size, maybe different size candles, different colors, maybe a bundle of 3 here, a bundle of 5 here. That's a way to work around that.
One other question I know my listeners will have is talk about how to differentiate between and choose between Shopify and Etsy. Can you do both? Which one's better? Pros and cons of each.
Yes. So if you are building your brand up to be a sellable asset at some point, you should have your own website. You should be direct to consumer on multiple platforms and have wholesale. But I would say with Shopify, a lot of people start with Shopify instead of Etsy. They build these beautiful websites, right? It's like takes a couple months. They pay someone like $5,000 to do it. And it's a grand opening and it's crickets. They have like their sister bought something and their mom did. It's a little sad, but the traffic is the number one problem with Shopify. So what we do is we focus on where's the fastest place to build the brand. It's Etsy because they're paying for all the customers to come to the platform. And then once we get customers in, we direct them to Shopify later as step 2. So they can become, their future purchases can go to Shopify, but for customer acquisition, Etsy is just much more affordable and faster.
I love that you're converting them to Shopify from Etsy, because I know a lot of people, may have concerns about Etsy seller fees or things like that. How do you talk through some of those concerns that some of your clients may have?
Yeah. So with the seller fees, it's between 9 and 10% in total, including the transaction fee. So that's something to consider. Now, that is way less expensive than any amount of ads you'd be running to Shopify. It's less expensive than even like the flat rate for having Shopify plus any apps that you've added on, right? Your Shopify, like for me, Shopify, it's minimum of like $50 to $60 a month, minimum. I sell on both platforms. And the thing is with Shopify, when you look at the cost to acquire a customer, it's going to be way higher of a percentage of that transaction than what you'd be giving to Etsy.
That makes sense. Yeah. So in kind of wrapping up, if you had a tip for someone that is just starting, or maybe 1 or 2 tips, they're just starting out selling on Etsy, what would you recommend to them?
Yes, I would say this is kind of, I could talk for an hour about this, but I'll just say it for a minute. Front load with loss leaders, because it is so important. If you are starting on Etsy, you don't have a track record on Etsy, you need to focus on order velocity. So the frequency of sales happening. You don't want to wait, for, let's say you sell $50 candles. You don't want like an order to trickle in once a week. We need to, maybe like the tea light. Is that what it's called?
Tea lights.
Yeah, tea lights, like, maybe it's like sample sizes. Just crank those out to get that order number under your shop name up really high, really fast. So front load with loss leaders until you have a few thousand sales.
Okay. And when you say loss leaders, explain that a little bit for someone in my audience that may not know what you're talking about.
Yes. So that's going to be something that's lower price point, lower margin. Now you're not going to lose money on this.
Mm-hmm.
So you're making like 50 cents per transaction or $1 per transaction. So you're not losing money, but the whole purpose is to build your brand position up, and it will also impact the ranking of your other listings. So if you're selling 20 of these, maybe like $4 sample size items a day, it's going to help the ranking of your $50 product, your listing, your $100 listing. So it benefits the whole shop, and it just will grow your brand so much faster.
Interesting. And tell my listeners how they can work with you, what services that you provide if someone is starting an Etsy shop.
Yes. So the type of coaching that we do, it's one-on-one private coaching, and then we give you 4 coaching calls a week. So it's actually unlimited private coaching, 7 days a week. I have a night crew in there, a day crew. We help people in 35 countries, and it's full support. So we teach you how to grow on Etsy, but then how to expand onto Shopify, Amazon, and so forth. So it is full support, and you can just schedule. We have free calls you can schedule, and on the call, we really just look at your business, see if it's a good fit, kind of assess where you're at. And if it's not, we'll provide free resources for you. If it is, we can show you kind of what the path for growth would look like. And we take on people who don't have an Etsy shop, but we also take on people who are on Etsy. Maybe they're even doing up to 1 to 8 million a year.
Okay. And we are going to put a link if someone wants to schedule a call with you or your team. We'll put a link there in the show notes if you are interested in learning a little bit more about working with Dylan and her team. So check that out in the show notes.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I find this so fascinating, and I think it's just a reminder for me of maybe it's time to get back on Etsy because it's been so long. Things have changed. And so, yeah, I loved learning from you. So any last parting words of wisdom or anything that you want to share?
Yeah, I would just take a look at really the profitability of your business if you are prioritizing wholesale right now, and just consider this as an opportunity to increase your overall margin, your blended margin. It's always good to have that balance for the health of your business of B2C and wholesale, and we're happy to show you what it would even look like.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dylan. I appreciate you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the She Sells Differently podcast. We will be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Until then, we are cheering you on. All right, that's a wrap on today's episode of She Sells Differently. Friends, it would be a huge blessing to me if you would take 2 seconds to rate and subscribe to my podcast. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Until then, I'm cheering you on in your entrepreneurial journey. See you next time.